Call this meeting.
You for this many blessings you passed down upon us. And Lord, we just ask that you continue to bless those that are suffering from this COVID-19 virus. And Lord, just keep us safe from all those possible infections that we can receive from it. And Lord, I ask you to watch over this meeting and be with it as it be conducted in order and proper fashion, Lord. And we ask that you just watch over and bless each and every one of us and keep us safe on our return trip home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. In light of Chairman Webb's announcements at the end of the last meeting, I think a few comments are in order just to make sure we are proceeding in accordance with law and the county's adopted policies. The first issue that needs to be addressed as we move forward to conduct any public business is the vacancy in the office of the chair and the impending vacancy in the office of supervisor from the Laurel Fork District. Pursuant to Virginia Code Section 24.2-226, a resignation becomes irrevocable after the date stated by the public officer for his resignation. Also, as a corollary to that, we have a 1977 Attorney General opinion stating that a resignation at some date in the future is inoperable until that date arrives or until it is accepted by the governing body. Based on that, where that puts us is that the position of chairman is vacant because it was effective immediately. The position of supervisor from the Laurel Fork District is not vacant, and Mr. Webb continues in that office, of course, until the effective date of June 30th, 2020. The first question I think the board may want to consider is, and there is a procedure that I'll walk you through for making an interim appointment pending a special election and having the circuit court order a special election that, given the timing that we have, we can have that on the November general election ballot. The first question I would pose to the board, though, is whether the board prefers to operate with the vice chairman conducting meetings until an interim appointment is made, or whether the board wishes to fill the position of chairman at this time. There are pros and cons either way, but one thing you might consider is whoever that interim appointment may be may want to have a voice in the determination of who is appointed chairman to serve out until next January. The other side of that coin is that you'd be operating with just the vice chair until that time, and so if the vice chair were unable to attend, then we'd have to dust off Robert's rules, have a chairman pro tempore appointed, and it makes it complicated that way as well. So it's the pleasure of the board. I think that you're valid either way, but wanted to raise that issue for you.
So I'm assuming we should have a motion to do either continue on or to have an election for chairman.
I think it would make sense to either have a motion to postpone that question until you've made an interim appointment to the Laurel Fork District, or have a motion to fill the position now.
I'd entertain a motion. Either way, however y'all want to, what y'all want to do.
Make a motion, we do it now.
So I have a motion that we have election for chairman.
I'll second.
Any discussion? And call for vote. Start with you, Tracy.
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Philip?
Yes.
Dr. Little?
Yes.
I say yes. All right, should you conduct that, or I do this? Same way.
We have a valid vice chairman, so I think you
All right.
can conduct that, sir.
All right, do I have a motion for chairman?
I make a motion for Tom Littrell for chairman.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any other nominations? Hearing none, I move, close the nomination and call for a vote. Start with you, Tracy.
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Philip?
Yes.
Dr. Littrell?
Abstain.
All right, motion carries. So I'll hand you the gavel.
This is a bit of a surprise.
And the block.
And Mr. Chairman, just if I could briefly just give the board an overview of next steps as far as filling the Laurel Fork supervisor seat.
Please do.
Once the Mr. Webb's seat is vacant, the board will have the option to make an interim appointment who will serve in that position until the general election can be held. The board will need to petition the circuit court to order a special election in November. And if, and it's a process we've done multiple times in the past, it's not very complicated. We'll be able to handle that pretty seamlessly. The only other thing I would say is if, I guess, if this board is not able to fill that interim slot, then that would go to the discretion of the circuit court whether to make an interim appointment in lieu of the Board of Supervisors doing so. But again, that's not something that really you need to make a decision on until July. So as of now, we have a full operating board, and I think we can move forward to conduct business.
Thank you. This comes as quite a surprise, and I'm not sure I'm prepared to go with the meeting, but I'll do the best I can under the circumstances. Our next item on the agenda is payment of invoices.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the payment of invoices.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion to approve the payment of invoices? Seeing none, I assume you're ready to vote. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Yes. Our next item of business is approving the minutes of the previous meetings.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion we accept the minutes of the previous meeting.
All right, the motion is to set the minutes of the previous meeting on May the 11th. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Yes. Our next item is public hearing on emergency ordinance. I'll open the public hearing at 7:07, and you have something to say about that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is the ordinance that would, as you know, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and social distancing became necessary, the board had to adopt a continuity of local government ordinance as an emergency measure that can only remain in place for a limited amount of time. This today would be to offer and receive public comment on adopting a continuity of local government ordinance that would be able to stay in place for up to 6 months, should it become necessary to continue with alternative meeting procedures due to the pandemic and the guidance we're receiving from state and federal health authorities.
Thank you. Have we received any comments from any of the public? Do any members of the board like to would they like to make any comments?
I think it's important that we passed, that we cover all our bases for what the governor may, delegate to us. So this will help us get to just like we have before. So,
Is there any sign when it could be that so many people would start coming back?
That's going to depend, I think, case by case as we continue to do testing across the Commonwealth and assess whether total cases and transmission of cases are going up or going down. But it brings up a very good point. Both Mr. Hill and Mr. Moore raised the point that having this ordinance in place does not require you to use alternative procedures. So anytime that this board is comfortable, you can resume holding meetings in accordance with normal procedures, but you'll have it in place. God forbid, if there's a flare-up or some other issue, you've got that ordinance in place so that you can use alternative procedures when that's appropriate. It does expire after 6 months, and it does provide that it expires when the public health emergency ends. So if we're able to contain the virus earlier than we expected, then the ordinance could expire earlier. But you're always free to use standard procedures. This just gives you the choice.
Anyone else like to make comment?
Still going up, are
Do we need to read that?
You don't need to read the entire ordinance into the record. I think it was advertised, it's been included in the agenda packet.
If there are no more comments, I'll close the public hearing at 7:11. Do I have a motion that we accept this?
I make a motion that we pass this emergency ordinance. It's a continuous thing, I'm assuming. We have to do this as long as we have to have a public hearing how often, every 60 days, 90 days?
Now that it's been advertised and a public
Yeah.
hearing is held, it would remain in place for 6 months unless you decide to terminate it sooner.
I make a motion, we pass the emergency ordinance.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
I'm switching around a little bit. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Yes. I'm trying to shake things up a little bit.
All right.
We have another public hearing on SB 149.
Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is a draft ordinance that would amend the courthouse security fees applicable in criminal and traffic cases in Carroll County's circuit and district courts. It would raise that fee from the statutory maximum of $10 to $20 effective July 1st, 2020. Before the meeting began, I passed around alternative versions, and that's because I actually received a public comment. I received a call this morning from Mr. Joey Haynes, who raised a good point, and I assured him I would raise it with this board. And
Open the public hearing first before you make comments.
you can, I'm just making introductory comments.
It'll take full time to do that. I'll open the public hearing on our SB 149 as the courthouse security ordinance at 7:13. Please go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that was posed to me by Mr. Haynes was whether the higher fee, the $20 fee, if adopted, would be applicable to any conviction rendered after July 1st, 2020, or whether it would be applicable to any charges with an offense date after July 1st, 2020. And the difference would be that some of these cases, you may have been charged back in December. They're just processing through now on certain criminal or traffic matters. And so you would have had a situation where your offense was committed in 2019 perhaps, but the higher fee would be imposed notwithstanding, because the conviction date would be after July 1, 2020. That has the upside to that ordinance is that it provides some assurance and predictability for legal counsel in the area who've already briefed clients that, this fee would be applicable. $10 security fee would be applicable if you plead or are convicted. The downside to that, as I can see, is that it may be more cumbersome for the clerk's offices to administer, because they'd be constantly checking the offense date to determine whether this is a $20 fee or a $10 fee. Whereas if you adopt it effective as to the date of conviction, the clerk's offices will know any conviction entered after July 1, 2020 will have the uniform $20 fee. But the state code does not mandate either way. I reviewed that this morning and didn't see that it's dictating whether you can key it to offense date or conviction date. So it's within the board's discretion, I think, to adopt it either way.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Mr. Spangler here. Are these included on the summonses, the amounts? Does the summonses have to be updated and that sort of thing?
Well, the prepayment forms have to be updated, some of them. A lot of that, when they do prepay and stuff like that, it's added in the quarter.
Okay.
It'll all have to be put in there. We'll have to redo the prepay form.
Okay.
Which is not a really a big deal. They just done it all when we've done the e-ticket as well, so it's already done.
Okay.
Do we have any other public comment? No. Any other board members have anything to say? I received 2 copies of this. Are they identical?
They're slightly different. You'll see at the bottom of one, it says in the red section is that this ordinance shall be effective as to any conviction entered by the district and circuit courts of Carroll County with an offense date on or after July 1st, 2020. So it's key to the offense date. The other, you'll see, it says this ordinance shall be effective as to any conviction entered by the district and circuit courts of Carroll County on or after July 1st, 2020. So that would be key to conviction date. And it's my recommendation that you adopt one of the red line versions, not the one that was exactly in the packet. I think it's substantially the same. This is just a matter of clarification, so I don't think that re-advertisement would be necessary to adopt those minor changes.
So if we do vote to approve, we'd have to pick one of these 2.
That would be my recommendation.
Hearing no other comments, I'll close the public hearing at 7:18. And I'm using the time on my computer rather than clock, because they're about 2 minutes difference. Does anyone want to make a motion to accept one or the other of these two ordinances that have been presented to us?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we base it on the offense date of July 1. Is that's the one that is, from that date forward, everything would, I think that would be simpler. So I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion from a board member? Assuming you're ready to vote to accept that motion, I'll start with Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item of business is to advertise, an authorization to advertise the fiscal year 21 budget.
Mr. Chairman, in order to enact a budget in time, this year the budget calendar requires the latest date that we can hold a public hearing is 22nd, which means we have to advertise 2 weeks prior to that, which is before the next board meeting. So I would request permission to advertise the Carroll County projected revenue for fiscal year 21 with a total projected revenue of next year of $79,120,649, which you have in front of you. There's also a projected budget that you have that matches those numbers, and on the last page, the total expenditures next year is $79,120,000. Also, 126.49, excuse me.
I know it's the 11th hour, but is it appropriate to to question one of our previous discussions?
I think it's appropriate anytime you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I have mentioned it before, that I feel like our county employees are some of our most important assets in the entire operation. And I've heard several people concerned about the insurance cost increase. And I also am concerned about the big difference between the dual and the family cost that we're projecting for the Key Advantage 1000. And I've done some hen scratching on my paper here that we were given, and just for sake of discussion, I had increased the county cost for the dual by $200, and the county cost for the family for the Key 1000 for $340, which would reduce the employee's amount. And if I did my math correctly, which I did manually, that would increase the budget by almost $260,000. But I think it's important that we look after our employees.
I agree 100%.
I'm not sure where it goes from there, but that's just something I felt very strongly about.
Well, the budget as proposed is advertised, for advertisement is for fiscal planning purposes only. So until you adopt that budget, you can move monies around anywhere you'd like. So I would assume what we would do based off your request is to go back and see exactly how many people signed up for which and come up with an actual cost, so we know where to take it from which account and move it around, since currently what's presented is a balanced budget.
I just used the numbers on this sheet, so I'm not sure how accurate that is when it finally turned out to be the case.
If it's okay, we'll bring back the impact of that and get with the insurance carrier at the June 8th meeting, 2 weeks from tonight.
Appreciate that, thank you. With that said, I guess we need an authorization motion to advertise the budget at our next, advertise our budget
One other
for fiscal year
question.
21.
One other question, please. On the reduction in our transient lodging tax, meals tax, are those primarily because of the loss of revenue we're seeing from the current situation?
What we've done is looked at the last couple of months, plus we looked at what the state projected and VACO projected that we'd lose 25% of some of those taxes, sales tax, et cetera. And we've shown that on here. If it's better than that, then that's some money, if we get higher revenues, some money that you can play with later on.
And also on our real property tax and those reflections that are more realistic due to, by what we have collected in the past. Is that what we've done?
On the real property tax, the difference between the 18,028 and the 15,1 is based off what you've really been collecting. In the past, you had shown a collection of delinquent of several $1 million there. So we've taken that off, and there's one place that you don't see a line item is where you had that adjustment in the past, a negative, and if you don't see that on this advertisement. I did send this to the treasurer and ask her to go through it line item by line item and tell us, relay this to us if there was any glaring or errors that she saw, and she sent me an email back that it was that we discussed in our preliminary planning sessions.
Any other questions about the budget to be advertised?
I just, assuming that this is like $4.6 million short compared to what we brought in last year. I mean, that's what it shows, the difference.
It is. You're getting an additional $1.9 million of state dollars and $555,000 of federal dollars to soften that blow, but it's about 4.6 less than you advertised last year. You advertised 38,586,902 last year.
With a month to go, how are we on last year's budget versus what we brought in to right now? We're gonna be pretty close to.
Mr. Moore, I can go get the treasurer's report, but I think we're significantly behind what we projected from last year.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
Make a motion, we advertise the budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further board discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before you go on. As you go through this, I'll remind each and every one of you, and I've told as many department heads as I can, and including the sheriffs, not get too excited about what's advertised. As we're going through this, there's obviously things that we don't know, and the changes that are going on with the state funds, et cetera. So we'll sit down and do the public hearing process and hear all their comments, and at the end, we'll get it where everybody can agree and can move forth and do their jobs.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I sense you're ready to vote, so I'll start with Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Is there any further old business that I'm not aware of? If not, we'll proceed to new business. The first item on the new business is the consent calendar.
Make a motion to amend the consent calendar to add a letter to Go Virginia. I'd like to make a motion that approve the consent calendar with, I want to add a letter to Go Virginia to read at the end of our new business.
Is there anything else that would like to talk about the consent calendar? Was it, I'm sorry, was that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, second.
Yep.
Second.
Now as for any discussion, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rusty at this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the letter Mr. Hill requested, Virginia Industrial Alliance has asked that we send a letter of support for an application for funding from Go Virginia.
Anybody else have anything? Assuming you're ready to vote, I'll start with Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't get my eyes on it. Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Yes.
Nothing to give it.
Doing a fine job.
Our next item of new business is the VACORP renewals.
Mr. Chairman, you, members of the board, you have before you the proposal from VACORP on workman's comp, real estate, personal property, and real property for next fiscal year. As we went through this, you can see your new premium total amount is $145,370. That's actually less than last year's by several $1,000. The finance committee and finance staff went through all the renewals, found out duplications of coverage and other items, and we've removed those and hopefully have all the proper coverages in place. There's only one thing that scares me about this renewal. We have asked for coverage for Levels Creek Dam, and because it's an earthen structure, we cannot obtain insurance for failure of that dam. That's something that the board needs to be well aware. There's a huge liability out there if that structure failed. We've inquired with DGIF if they'd accept that dam and property, and they politely refused. So we need to follow up and see how we can proceed and reduce our liability with that earthen dam.
You know what the options might be at this point?
I do not. I think what I have gotten is we've gotten a copy of the latest inspection of the dam, and there was a partnership of when that was built for flood control for Mount Airy, North Carolina. So we need to meet with our partners and see if how we can proceed with this and safely be protected from a catastrophic failure there.
Thank you. Any other questions about the VACORP renewals? Do I have a motion to accept them?
I make a motion that we accept the Vacor renewals.
Is there a second?
I'll second
Thank you. Any further discussion? We'll start the vote then with Mr. McCraw.
it. Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Yes. Our next item under new business is an unclaimed body. Is this the same one we discussed last time?
I think this is a different.
Well, it's under new business, so I thought it might be.
It seems that as we move forth, that you're getting more and more of these unclaimed bodies. I think we talked about that a long time ago. The first one that came in several months back. I think you will see this more and more in the future.
Mr. Chairman? The only thing that I would comment on with the unclaimed body is that under section 32.1-309.2 of the Virginia Code, it does provide that the decedent's assets shall be seized to defray the county's cost in disposing of an unclaimed body. Lots of times, there are no assets to seize, but it's something that I would just sort of remind the board and relay to sheriff's office or anyone else that if we do have information that this decedent may have assets, the code requires that they be seized. It's not discretionary, so it's something that we want to make sure we're following up on.
Thank you. I'm sure you've read your agenda, but it also says, please find attached the court order invoice concerning an unclaimed body. The Board of Supervisors is required to appropriate $1,000 to pay Baldwin McGrady Chapel for the unclaimed body, so it appears we have no choice. We just need to appropriate the money.
Make a motion, we appropriate that amount of money.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? We'll proceed to vote. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Yes. Next item on the new business, under new business, is committee appointments, and we have 3 openings. The Regional Library, our representative has resigned, Southwest Virginia EMS, and the the Solid Waste Authority.
Mr. Chairman, if I may request that we delay these until the next meeting. Ms. Weaver just passed away this weekend from her bout with cancer. Hopefully at the next board meeting, we can have interviews for the EMS director. So if we can just delay these and just table it until the next meeting, I would appreciate it.
Okay, do I have a motion to table these appointments until next meeting?
I make a motion, we table these until the next meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll start the voting with Mr. McCraw.
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Yes. Our next item on the agenda is our Robinson Farmer Cox contract for our audit.
Mr. Chairman, we advertised and received proposals. However, we only received one proposal back on the main contract for the county. It's Robinson Farmer Cox. The price they presented is the same price that we currently have. Please note in number 8, down at under the pricing, that the fees shall increase 3% every year thereafter until the contract expires. And the cost for next year for the county audit is $52,000. The Carroll County PSA audit is $12,000. The Carroll County EDA audit is $7,000. And the cost allocation plan is $4,250.
Is this contract for a single year, or does it continue?
It's a multi-year contract with the right to renew, but it also provides stipulation that the county can give notice. And if you don't feel that they're doing the audits, I think it takes a 1-year notice if I revisit. But it is a 5-year contract.
Thank you. Is there a motion, motion to accept the Robinson Farmer Cox contract for our audits?
I make a motion, we accept the contract.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any board discussion?
Are they the only firm that's out there that's available?
Mr. Moore, they're not the only firm that's available. They were the only firm that responded in accordance with the advertisement with a proposal back to the county. The audit will have to start here as soon as the fiscal year. We advertised back in February, and we finally got the proposals in on end of March, and went through those, and we got the price for the same as the current one, which we felt was okay, especially since we only had one proposal to try to negotiate.
I had an opportunity to speak to our Representative Gordon Jones, and he was very cordial and very helpful, so as far as I can tell, they've always done us a good job. Any further discussion? I assume you're ready to vote then, Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
McCraw? Yes. Our next item is the CARES relief funds, which, if you read the Gazette.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there were two parts to that contract.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see that.
The second part is a proposal from Hickok Brown firm from Abington. Y'all have held a contract with them for several years to prepare the necessary pre-audit documents so the auditors can have those. As you well know, we currently don't have a finance director. Several of us are trying to, I guess, can manage that with our other duties, and we'd ask that you review the Hickok and Fern proposal. It's an hourly contract. They estimate the cost between $15,000 and $20,000 and it is a multi-year contract for 3 years.
Thank you. I did not scroll down far enough to see that. With the explanation from Mr. Dalton, do I have a motion, and then we can discuss it?
Make a motion, we accept the proposal from Hickok.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Now, is there any discussion?
The question from the county attorney was on the procurement side of that. I'd taken that since Hickok and Fern had been a long-term Prospect, and there's only two of these people that do these pre-audit things. And the other one, Mary from Stanton, is not available. That this is how we would have to go.
It falls under the small purpose if you did just environment.
Thank you. Want to keep it straight. Anybody else have any discussion? We'll start the voting with Mr. McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. McCraw,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Yes.
Now,
We're ready for the CARES relief funds discussion, and if anybody saw the Gazette, it looked like Carroll County and the city of Hillsville, the town of Hillsville was rewarded with about $2.6 million to be spent in some fashion or other, with restrictions.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it appears the restrictions are longer than what you can spend it for. It's basically a reimbursement of funds that qualify under the description that they're putting out there. And there is meetings and discussions going on with VACO and other counties to try to get this approved where there's no strings attached, instead of just charging for extra expenses through the COVID. We are working on it. Hopefully we can come up with a plan and have it presented back to the board at some future date, but there is a cost-sharing requirement with the town, and we had to sign a letter and certification that we'd accept these funds by last Friday, which we did. And half of these funds will be deposited in the county treasurer on June the 1st. And the rest of it will be at some later date after you submit the proper certifications to the state. The unfortunate part is that what we share with the town is we've got to certify it too, so there'll have to be some type of an agreement of how that goes about.
Needed a board action tonight to accept it.
I would request that you ratify our certification that we would accept the money from last week. And the second part of this is that it will, on July 1st, require a public hearing because it's greater than a certain percentage of the budget of how you will spend it once we have a plan in place.
It sounds like we need a motion to certify what's already been done, pardon me, to accept these funds. Is there a motion to do so?
I make a motion that we certify or ratify the decision that was made last week.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? So when you're ready to vote, we'll start with Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. McCraw.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. McCraw.
Yes.
Yes. Would anybody like to discuss anything that's included in the informational packet?
Mr. Chairman, it's not in the informational packet, if I may, but at our preceding meeting today, there are some things that came out that are paramount, not to the board maybe, but to the citizens of the county. We understand, based off a presentation at that meeting, that anybody that is a farmer out there that has cattle, hay crops, corn crops, by simply going and contacting FSA, and if they have cattle as of a certain date, earlier this year in February, and all the way through later this year, that they can get payment for the reduced price of that beef and also their crops. But they have to go to the FSA to make that. We intend to place it on our website, as we have with all the COVID information. But for a farmer that had 50 cattle and sold it, I think it's $130-some per cow, that they'll subsidize you to make up for that loss of income that where you sold the cattle at a reduced price this spring.
Thank you. That'll be important information for our agricultural community. And speaking of that, that brings one thing to mind. Do we have we have two members on the land use committee yet?
Oh, well, we had Mr. McCraw and myself. Mr. McCraw has wanted to step aside, and I think you or Tracy, one had indicated that y'all would like to be on it, so it's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Do you need one or two?
Either way, it's fine with us.
Either way,
We can both do it if you want to.
that'd be fine. Yeah,
Okay.
First meeting's Monday at 9 a.m.,
9 a.m., okay.
June 1st.
So you and I will represent the board on the land use committee.
I spoke with Fran, but at that time Philip was, so that's him we used email.
That's all that's on the agenda that I have, is that correct? Except for the closed session.
Unless somebody's got something critically important, we would like to dispense with the closed session.
That sounds good to me. In that case, it sounds like we're ready for adjournment. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you. Find the gavel under these papers, I would strike it.